Welcome to the Suspension Sessions from RBC, the podcast that dives into the science, service and setup behind MTB suspension. I'm Glen, and together Robbie and I explore the fundamentals every rider should understand, from sag and seals to tuning, service intervals and long-term performance. If you want your suspension dialed, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Robbie's going to give us some great ideas and tips on why service intervals on your suspension matter.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for the invitation and welcome everybody. We see a lot of suspension on a daily basis, and obviously coming from all over the world, and also being able to track the suspension when I'm overseas as well gives me a good idea of what we need to look for and how guys need to really take care of their investments. So first of all, most manufacturers, in fact all of the manufacturers, will list on either on their website or in the suspension owners manuals, they will give a recommended service interval. So generally a small service, we call it either a lower leg or air can service, should be every 50 hours. And then thereafter the guys will have 100 hour, 200 hour, 400 hour, and even up to 600 hour services. And in those different service intervals, different parts will be replaced as they wear out over that length of time. Now, for a lot of people, they don't understand, or they're not tracking how much their riding they've been doing. So for those guys who are not doing 50 hours in 6 months, if they're doing 50 hours in 8 months, I would still recommend that we do a 6-month service, which is, for me, easier to track, especially for anyone doing like a weekend riding. It's just easier to track every 6 months. You need to come down or send your suspension to us for a service, or take it to one of your trusted guys to do a service. Generally, with a 50-hour service, we normally look at dropping the lowers on a fork. And I know a lot of guys will try and do that themselves, or will have the local dealer doing it. However, it can also be quite bad for the fork if you don't perform the following operations. So we like to actually do a full damper and an air can or air cartridge clean out and refill when we do a lower leg service. And the reason for that, Glenn, is that while the guys are riding, in that time, that lower leg oil that's been fitted into or put into the fork at the last service is going to be ingested into the damper, especially if it's a closed damper. And it will also go into the negative chamber of the air cartridge, which will degrade the ride quality of the fork, and also even as far as actually pushing the travel down. We've seen a lot of instances where that's happened. So, yeah, and I think also, especially with closed dampers, it's important that the oil gets refilled properly. With the rear shocks, you obviously don't have that ingestion issue, but you do have temperature and higher pressures that you're dealing with. So in that instance, still 6 months applies. It's good to just change your seals because they do square off, especially under high pressure. Some of the shocks out there, the pressure differentiation between the damper and the air can be quite extreme, which allows some of the air to go into the damper. So it's good that every 6 months we check on this, otherwise your damping is not working. So yeah, definitely an important part of keeping your expensive investment working properly.
And when you say squared off seals, what does that mean?
Well, when the seals are under pressure, and we're talking about 300 to 400 psi in the current shocks these days, the seals actually get like kind of pressed into that position. They got a negative chamber, which has got the same pressure as the positive chamber, and it kind of pushes those seals into a square situation where they don't seal like they should.
And 6 months, I mean, my car can run for 12 months without an oil change. Why are we at a 6 month level here?
Yeah, sure. Well, in the forks, most forks require the oil to actually run. So the oil will fill between the stanchions and the bushings. And as oil is not compressible, the bushings and stanchions won't touch when there's oil present, which allows it to work frictionlessly as it does. However, if you look at the stanchions under a microscope, you'll see there's lots of hills and valleys. And as you're riding, the fork is actually pulling that oil out into the environment. The dust sits on it, you wash it off. Eventually, the 10 or 15 mils that is in your lower leg is going to be gone. And once that dissipates, your fork is running on the stanchions and bushings are working together in a friction component, which they're not designed for. So
that's very low volumes.
Yes, very low volumes. Because there is limited space, and when the fork compresses, liquid is not compressible, so the oil needs to vaporize and be pushed up into the top to reach the foam wiper, so it can run down. Obviously, I'm talking about the forks now. The rear shocks also have a small amount of oil, very heavy oil. It does come out, but not at the same quantities.
So if you're seeing some oil residue on your stanchions, then obviously that's a normal thing. You don't have to concern yourself with that.
It's an interesting subject that you brought up because it's quite open to interpretation. A healthy fork that's just been serviced will have some oil on the stanchions. You can visibly see a little sheen, like a light sheen in the light, showing where the oil level is. That's perfectly normal. However, if the oil is coming out and it's running down the back of your fork leg, or it's pooling at the bottom of your shock and dropping onto your frame, that is a problem.
And then the 100 or 200 hour services, what do those entail? You mentioned a lower leg service and an air cane service, and that you clean out the damper.
So typically, we will, on a 200 or a 100 hour service, we will replace the scraper wipers. It all depends, actually. In Europe, I find the conditions quite forgiving, where the scraper wipers can last a couple of years. It also depends on how much riding the customer is doing. But here in South Africa, with the heat and the dust, I find that they harden fairly quickly. So we tend to replace them generally on a yearly basis. We will also do a damper service, so replace the O-rings in the damper, and of course replace the O-rings and seals in the air side, which does a lot of work.
The different brands of suspension, is there a difference? Is there something people need to bear in mind if you've got an Öhlins, or a DT Swiss, or a Fox, or a RockShox?
Well, the most important thing I can say is follow the instructions from the distributor or from the manufacturer really closely, and make sure you use the correct oils. We see a lot of weird, funny oils where the manufacturer is calling for a heavier weight. The guys are just using whatever they can get their hands on, and that, especially in the lower leg, doesn't allow the fork to work correctly. So the original parts and the correct oils and the correct oil viscosities and the correct oil levels is very important.
Talking about oil viscosities and oil in the forks, sometimes people talk about a fork knock.
Generally, it means that there's either the oil needs to be circulated inside the fork. So in other words, the fork has been sitting maybe on a shelf or in a container somewhere before it's been assembled. The lower leg oil is now all at the bottom of the fork, and your stanchions and bushings have got no lubrication between them. So there is obviously a space between the stanchions and the bushings, which is how the oil gets in between the two. So in that case, my suggestion would be just to turn the fork upside down, especially if it's brand new. Let the oil sit there, go down into your bushings or into your foam wipers for a couple of hours, and it should be good. However, as the fork gets older, sometimes bushings need to be replaced or resized. We do some bushing resizing as well. In fact, we do it as a rule. When we do our 100-hour or 200-hour service, we will resize the bushings on all the forks that come in. It just makes sure that the forks are working as they should do. The other one that, notably, if you look at some of the forks are calling for a very heavy oil in the lower legs. If you don't use that oil, the gap in between the bushings and the stanchions will not be filled enough with a thinner oil to actually stop the fork from feeling like there's a knock or a headset that's loose. So just check on that with either with us or with your local dealer.
And then sometimes you can get a bit of a creak in your front end. What is that all about?
Yeah, so generally on a new fork, we would consider that a warranty case. If it's within this 2-year period, it's best to send it back to the manufacturer, let them replace the CSU. Alternatively, if it's a little bit older than that, we push out the stanchions, we clean them up, and we reseat them again at the correct ISO tolerances and pressures. And once we've done that, we generally find that they don't come loose again. But it can either be the fork legs or the actual steerer tube. And what we find is that with the flex, especially on longer travel forks, guys that are doing like enduro or jumping or whatever, we find that the crown actually walks up the steerer tube because of the flex. So then you start getting a bit of a creak out of it. But considering that it's pressured into there at more than 5 tons, it's not going to come loose at any time. It just needs to be reseated again. So we will push it out, clean it, put some special Loctite on what we use, reinsert it again, and check it. Our torque settings, we check on that to 80 Newton meters. So yeah, 100%.
So most of it is repairable?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually, we've got a little video on our YouTube channel that shows you how we do that. Yeah.
And then what is the lifespan of suspension? I mean, I know it's a difficult question, but if you're sticking to your specified service intervals, how long can you expect these things to last?
Keep in mind it is a moving part, like your tires or your chain, your cassette, so it's bound to wear out at some point. It won't last forever. I mean, you know, people don't realize it, and I tell most people who come in and ask me that exact question: how long should it last, or why do I need to service it now? When we're doing our telemetry setups and we let the riders go take their bikes for a test ride with our telemetry setup, which records data from the suspension, on average in a 20-kilometer route, the suspension is going to compress and rebound at least 66,000 times. So, I mean, given that, I mean, it's super hard working. It's very light. It really is a masterpiece of engineering design that you're riding with. So, it is going to wear out, and that wear will be obviously exaggerated if you don't service it correctly. But generally, you'll probably replace your bike before you replace your suspension if your suspension is at the level that you're riding with. So keep in mind that as you're improving, if you're not riding with the top of the range suspension, you're going to ride over the level of that suspension. So understanding that, a lot of guys will replace it for something better. As soon as they start getting better, they will need to replace it for something better rather than having to replace it because it's worn out.
And who would give you that sort of information if you're now starting to do downhill?
Well, it's not even about that. It's, you know, a lot of people will look at a bike in the store and they'll say, okay, well, my budget is XYZ, where the budget should have been 10% more than that, actually. And I mean, obviously, we all need to keep within budgets, but understanding that the learning curve on your riding is quite steep. So when you start out riding, your idea of what you were planning on using it for and your idea of what you're going to achieve in the first 6 months is very different. So given that if you are riding your bike and you're enjoying it and you're riding with your mates, your riding level is actually going to improve a lot. And if you've bought the budget end bike, you're going to find that it's going to start. The bike is going to start slowing you down and not you slowing the bike down. So that's when you start needing to look at upgrading your bike. And the first place I would look is suspension, because it's the key component to how the bike works.
So what you should do then is ride with friends that aren't very good, because it's cheap.
On the contrary, it's always good to ride with guys who are much faster than you. Follow their lines and improve your skills.
Anything else you'd like to add about suspension servicing, Rob?
Yeah, just it's always good to. So I use an app called the Pros Garage, which allows me to then record my service intervals, and it will send me a reminder. So it connects to Strava. It will also then log my miles and my hours, and just send me a reminder when I need to service my suspension. I can actually set it up to do a whole lot of other stuff within on my bike. So if I need to change the chain, a cassette or whatever, it will remind me at a certain period.
And that's just available in the App Store?
Yes, it's available on the App Store, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Robbie.
No, thank you for the time, mate. It was really good.
Can't wait for the next one.
Cool.
Take care.